Today we've been joined by a very popular man in AFL football and being a former player agent and the like. We'll get right to it. Ricky Nixon, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Legend. I know that you're the most popular man on social media at the moment, so it's a pleasure to join you.
Thanks for coming on, Ricky. Really appreciate it. Now, obviously, people will know you for your time as being a player agent, but give a bit of background. You did actually play AFL, and you played 63 AFL games for 3 clubs. What was it like being a player all the way back then?
I must admit, given I do gigs with Dane Swan most weekends, he won 2 Brownlows premiership at Collingwood. I said, mate, I was in Mark of the Year twice, Goal of the Year twice, and the second longest kick in AFL history, and no one even knows who I am when it comes to playing the game. So, you know, look, I was probably lucky in respect to I played for 11 years at 3 clubs. Yeah. And when I went into player management, what it did was it allowed me to have access to like 50 players, I suppose, at each club. Yeah. So 150. So, you know, it's a little bit about being in the right place at the right time.
If you were to use a current AFL player comparison to yourself, the style of the way you played, who would you best describe that's playing right now that you would say you played like?
Geez, I've never thought of that. Let me think. I'd probably say Darcy Moore, but
okay, yeah.
But just to explain it, back in the day, that intercept player didn't exist, or they did, but not to the extent that Darcy did. And I was sort of more a high-flying mark intercept player a bit, I suppose. Played forward a bit as well. I sort of played every position and never succeeded at any of them. But, yeah, I mean, I was lucky to play with Tony Lockett, Nicky Winmar, you know, all the Carlton superstars, and, of course, Hawthorn when they won 7, probably all the premierships through the 80s and early 90s.
It's pretty decent play to have as a comparison as well. Now, obviously, some of the main things that you were was a list manager, being a player agent. How did you get into list management? How did that all come about? Obviously, played AFL, but how did that transition go from playing to list management side of things or play agency?
Yeah, I guess it was just sort of being in the right place at the right time. I mean, I worked with a girl, Michelle Baumgartner, who used to be a Commonwealth Games athlete, might have been Olympian as well. And she used to, we were PE teachers at Carey Grammar, famous private school in Kew, co-ed. And she used to come to work all the time. Oh, this guy said he's going to give me a Mercedes-Benz. This guy's going to sponsor me for this. And I said, can't be that hard. And there was this basketballer in America, you might have heard of him, Michael Jordan. And I'm looking at him going, oh, he just picked up, I don't know, $5 million for wearing Nike stuff. And why isn't anyone doing that in Australia? And people don't know this story very much, but Jeff Brown, the current president of Collingwood, and the CEO of the AFL at the time met with me and said, Ricky, we think that agents are going to become big in the game, but we think agents that have actually played the game are going to be beneficial. So we're going to send you to America and we're going to set up meetings with the gridiron over there, the basketball, the baseball, etc. Cut a long story short, when I went with the gridiron people, they had a thing called the quarterback club, which is what the top 10 quarterbacks in the gridiron at the time. And I thought, why isn't anyone doing that in Australia? So I came back. And, for example, I didn't manage Tony Modra at the time. And I said, Tony, join Club 10. And people get confused because Club 10 is not about 10 players. It's about Mitre 10 sponsored it. So I called it Club 10, but there was actually probably 15 players in the end that were in it. So anyway, that's how I got my start.
What do you like most about being as a player agent? What did you like most about being in that role when you transferred from AFL player to those roles?
It's a good question, mate. Well done. I can remember sitting at home one night, the first week after I started, the first week after I signed Wayne Carey. I think it was like 90 players signed with me. And a week later, or whatever it was, doesn't matter, 2 months later, Gary Ablett signed. So all the Geelong players signed. It was like the adrenaline rush and the excitement. And keep in mind, back then you had a computer the size of your TV screen. There was mobile phones that sort of just started. And, you know, I'd hate to think what probably agents go through these days with social media and hating and all that sort of stuff. But, yeah, it was like it was just an adrenaline rush the first 10 years, you know, and, you know, just to do a contract and get what you wanted. And it was helped a bit by, if you had Gary Ablett Senior and Wayne Carey and those sort of players, I told the clubs, you pay me this or else. And, you know, I'm not being egotistical, but I was just lucky. I was just lucky in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before, you listed off a few names there. Who were some of the biggest names you had? I've got a few names here. Am I right in saying that Ben Cousins and Nick Riewoldt and some people like that were some of the people that you managed when you had or they were playing?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess people know about Gary Ablett Senior and Lockett and Kerry Dunstall, all those. But players that even I was out with Brendan Favola, who I love, the other night. And he goes, Chicken, when you managed me, and I went, did I manage you? And he goes, yeah, I shafted you in the first few years, and I should have done that. And even players like James Hird, Matthew Lloyd, they moved on to other managers. A bit to do, or Matthew Lloyd because he thought I was favouring James Hird, Corey McKernan because he thought I was favouring Wayne Carey. I don't have any issues with any of that. And you know, like some of the players that I guess even a Gary Lyon, you know, you probably you know, you wouldn't say he's in Lockett or Carey or Dunstall's category, but he was a great player back in the day. People see him more in the media now, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah, I had seen a list of the names. Now there's obviously a lot of them, but am I right in saying all these guys, Matty Richardson, Nick Riewoldt, Tom Hawkins, Gary Lyon, as you mentioned, Tony Lockett, the Chief, Jason Dunstall, and Wayne Carey and Gablett Senior. Who would you say is the player that you enjoyed the most managing that I suppose that you got along with? Not necessarily the best player in terms of the quality, but like you just enjoyed and you got interacted with well and there was just smooth sailing. There was never really hassles between having them as being their agent.
I guess the way I'd explain it is when you manage players, you don't barrack for a team, you barrack for the players. So when Wayne Carey won 2 premierships in the 90s, well, go Wayne, go. I'd have to say, though, that Simon Black, I think, is the most underrated player in AFL history. He's got all the credits, you know, Brownlow's premierships, 3 premierships, absolute superstar, but also a superstar off the field. I love him to death. Matthew Richardson, Dougie Hawkins, all those guys. You know, they're just great players off the field as well. And I don't want to categorise, you know, every player or anything else because I always held this view. Everyone's different. So I might manage a player and I go, geez, you're an arrogant bastard. But guess what? You're very successful on the field and that matters to the bank account. And then you have other players who just are very team-orientated and everything else. But having said that, some of the players that I thought were a little bit arrogant were also very successful, won premierships.
That's good. So would you be fair to say, you mentioned about the money they make and everything like that. It's just like Supercoach and you're barracking for the player. It's like Supercoach, you're barracking for the individual players you've got in your team to go well and score well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, because you know, in the 90s when North Melbourne were pretty successful, I was barracking for Wayne Carey a fair bit, and then I barracked for Brisbane. Then after that, I'm trying to think I barracked. I had some I managed the coach of Port Adelaide at the time, Mark Williams, who I'm a big fan of. And you only got to look at where he's gone the last 10 years. Richmond, 3 premierships, now Melbourne. You know, you sort of barracked for whoever was the flavour of the moment, whether a coach or a player, etc. You know, and you know, I probably enjoyed it more now than just trying to barrack for a team.
Yeah, that's totally understood. But now, in more the list management side of things, what are some of the biggest deals that you did that went through, and even some ones that didn't go through, that even whether they're more until the end of your time doing it or at the start or in between? What would you say is the biggest deals that went through and didn't go through under your watch?
I'll probably say the biggest deal and the easiest deals were Wayne Carey. I want this, pay it or else. And they always paid it. Probably a little bit similar with Gary Ablett. I'll never forget when Gary Ablett, I won't quote the figures. Let's just say I wanted 700. The club offered 500. And I said 80% of people who go to games to watch Geelong go to watch Gary Ablett. And the CEO at the time, who unfortunately has passed away now, so I'm not being negative towards him, he just said, oh, well, you know, so what? You don't run this club. I do. I said, okay. Gary kicked 14 goals the next Saturday. I texted him and I said, mate, I run the club now, not you. And he paid the 700. So that was probably the best and funniest deal I've ever done. There's been some ones over the years where a player just had a one-off year and, you know, won a best and first or something like that, and you capitalised on it. But, you know, it goes with success. You know, Brisbane in that early 2000s era, you know, probably I had Simon Black, Michael Voss, Justin Lepich, those sort of players. You know, and I was just, you know, lucky at the time, I suppose, that sometimes when you've got great players, it's not hard to do deals. When you've got a player who's not so great, you've got to structure a deal that you go, I'm backing him in, and if he does this, you've got to pay up. And I reckon I was sort of fairly lucky in about 70, 80% of those.
That's fair. 2017, we'll fast track or backtrack a little bit, but further track from what we're talking about. 2017, 2018, you went to the trade period at Marvel Stadium. You're giving some clubs advice. I did read up a bit more on it. What was that like? How did that come about? Did a few clubs reach out? Did you reach out to them? How did that happen in the end?
Yeah, it was sort of like the clubs reached out to me and said, would you not be an agent? Would you come in and when we meet with some agents, would you then give us some advice on whether you think it's a good deal, a bad deal, or whatever? And like, I guess it was no one would know what I got involved in those deals. But then I decided after that, you know what? The AFL and the Players Association shafted me. I don't want to have anything to do with this whole official side of it. Look, I'm not going to go back over that. It's 12 years ago now. I'm moving on. And, yeah.
That's fair. Now, a bit more about the current type of thing with the trade lanes. How do you think this match is going, like with the mid-season drafts and the mid-season trade period, or people wanting that? What do you feel about that? Should there be a mid-season trade period?
Oh, look, yeah, probably trade period, I agree with. I'm not sure the draft really works, if you know what I mean. You're only picking up one player or two players, and I doubt that's...
and they're generally project players generally too,
Yeah, I think sort of, you know, some sort of trade period could work. All I know is that when it comes to trade week, I've never had more interest in my life, on Facebook or whatever else. And I understand because clubs, say Carlton right now, if they finish 40, everyone will be messaging me and texting me and everything else. What should Carlton do, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I understand people have a great interest in the value of a player, what they're worth contractually or what they're worth pick-wise, all that sort of thing. And you're the expert of that, mate, let's face it.
Thanks. So I'll get your opinion on Carlton. I actually did it in one of my podcasts the other night, but what do you feel Carlton should do with the players? With the overpaying of players, like got so many guys on long-term deals, some of them getting towards the end, some are just gone. Like obviously Cripps and Kerner and Mackay all earn big deals, but I personally don't like individual players getting any more over 5. Maybe some might get an exception for 6, but like in the time, and it could come back to bite Carlton like it did with Collingwood, with Grundy and that having to go out because of those reasons. That clubs shouldn't get as many long-term deals no matter who the players are, because then you could go into that problem that Collingwood have just gotten out of now.
Yeah, look, I speak about Carlton first. I understand why they signed the long-term deals, but they haven't performed, and that's happened before, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is, and I'll say this at the start, I love Scott Pendlebury, one of the most consistent best players of all time, and Craig McRae, geez, what a super coach he's proven to be. The last 20 clubs that have signed extended coaches' contracts and veteran players in the middle of the year when they think they're going all right, haven't won a premiership in the last 5 years. So I find it very interesting that they would do that. I love Craig, and as I said, I love Pendles, but geez, experience shows me that that's not a way to go. So why wouldn't you? Pendles isn't going to go anywhere. You win the flag this year or you finish top 4, doesn't matter. You re-sign him. If you finish top 4, Craig McRae, you re-sign him. Don't re-sign them now. I mean, so many clubs have made that mistake. Going back to Carlton, they lack one thing. They don't have a Petrarca. They don't have a Dustin Martin. They don't have a Toby Greene. They don't have a match winner who's a power player. Curnow is a great player, but and he kicks a lot of goals, but he doesn't kick that goal that you just go, that's changed our whole season. So, you know, what's the answer? Is Michael Voss the problem? Look, I honestly think that they just need to find that match winner. And I'll just tell you a very quick story about a club.
Yeah, it's just fun.
Black jumpers and yellow stripes. When they were struggling in 2016, I said, you know what? Stop worrying about the media. Stop worrying about what all the supporters are saying. Get the smile back on your face. Start laughing. I sent them to the Comedy Lounge in North Melbourne. And the comedians I put on stage took the piss out of all the players there. They won 3 premierships in 5 years or 4 years or whatever it was. And 2 other clubs copied them. They didn't win premierships, but they actually improved out. North Melbourne went to a prelim final. They did that. So, Carlton, you know what? Get the smiles back on players' faces.
That's a good point to make with Carlton as well. The Saints, I'm going to bring up being a Saints fan. Get your thoughts on Stephen Silvani and Gabby Allen at St Kilda. What are your thoughts of them coming back into the realm of St Kilda? And what do you think the Saints need to do to upgrade themselves on the ladder, at least?
Well, Gabby Allen's a very good friend of mine, and Ross Lyon is a great friend. And look, I love Ross. I think people don't give him the credit he deserves. He's been a grand final in the last 15 years. And also, too, when I had a coffee with him probably 6 months ago, he said, Rick, I've got to change my whole game style from being defensive and, stopping scoring. We need to be a high-scoring team. And if you were a St Kilda supporter, you'd look at this year and you go, wow, they play exciting footy now, don't they? And once Max King gets few more games under him and you've got these players coming to them, and they've found probably 5 players. And when I say found them, Ross has turned them into players that are A-grade, I suppose. So, if I was a Saints supporter, I wouldn't be getting carried away about this year. Speaking to the recruiting guys, who I know very well, they think they're 2 to 3 A-graders away from contending. And I'd probably agree. They probably just need that little bit of touch, what I said before, a Petrarca, that sort of player. But if I was a Saints fan, I'd be pretty excited.
Yeah, I agree. You've got King and Philippo as well from the most recent. Owens is having a great year in his second year. I agree with you. Yeah, they are probably a few often. Jake Gresham, Jake Billings, what do you think the Saints should do with those two guys? Obviously, they're both high-end draft picks. Had some good moments throughout the career. Billings has been more injured the last few years. What do you think that they should let Gresham go as a free agent or try and keep him? Because I feel personally that you may say about the A grades, which he can be, he has shown some inconsistencies, but he's that type of midfielder when he plays in the midfield that St Kilda probably missed. You've got Crouch and Ross and Steely are more the same inside mid-types, where Gresh is that X factor and he's got some speed about him. Do you think St Kilda could afford to lose him considering the type of player he is and they don't have many of, or do you think they could easily replace him?
Well, just my opinion, but I wouldn't be making many changes at all. I think that what Ross has developed is this club spirit where we are positive, we're going to win, we're going to play above what the player we're seen as. So the players who get criticised in football, and that happens every week because of social media, they need to say, well, I'm going to just get out there and I'm going to do something different, or I'm going to do this and prove that I'm not that player. And I think Ross has probably transformed 5 to 8 players who probably were average players. But he said, you know what? You're not an average player. You're a really good player. And this is where I'm going to play you. And I expect you to do this. And they've done it. And that's why there's been.
I agree. And I love the move when Ross came in. Obviously, like you mentioned earlier with the coaches getting contracts too quick, I thought the Brett Ratton one was far too rushed when they gave him that 2 extension. Like you said, why they have to rush it? No one was going to poach him at that time. They could easily waited to see how the season went. And obviously, it backfired. And then I think it was, who was the Collingwood person that came in? Forgot that a blank. Jeff. Oh, Walsh, wasn't it? I think came in and then.
Jeff Walsh went to St Kilda, yeah.
That's right. And then they kind of orchestrated that move, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I'd probably prefer not to comment on it because Brett Ratton's a former client, a good friend, and I was extremely disappointed in the way St Kilda
handled that. Yeah.
But at the same time, Ross Lyon's a good friend, and let's just say this: when Ross Lyon, I had a little bit to do with the Carlton situation, and Ross was going to be coach there, and the fact that they turned it around and said you got to go through a process. I must admit, Ross said to me they can get stuffed. I'm not going through a process, and I back him to this degree. And it was the same with Essendon. Essendon could have got him as well, but he felt that he had already proved he was a senior. And look, I agree with him, to be honest. But Essendon are the beneficiary of a draft 3 years ago, the best draft in 15 years. They got 5 of the best 20 picks. And while some people are a little bit critical of Adrian Dodoro, who's been there for 20 years, I'm a big fan of his. I think he does some great deals. And I think they're set up now for a really good 5 to 10 years. I really do.
Yeah. So you just mentioned there Ross Lyon with the Carlton link there. I wrote that at the time it happened, and I got crucified for that when it didn't happen. So can you please just confirm for everyone listening that was looking like that was going to happen?
Yes.
Thank you. Exactly. Right. Thank you. Just had to clarify that because I got ridiculed for that for a while. So it's good to get some final clarity on that. Now, throw your list management and back hat on. No, we spoke about Carlton and Collingwood. Some other clubs that you feel, Ricky, that need to, what you think they need to do to get their way up the ladder or just improve, or like West Coast, for example, like put their hat on. What do you think the Eagles or any other clubs you want to talk about that they should do to improve?
Well, I guess the Eagles are the ones that I'm interested in at the moment. People wouldn't realise this. The richest club in Australia is the West Coast Eagles, $80 million in the bank. But that doesn't win you a premiership, and you can't buy players these days. That's not the way the system works. So I think they just went that 1 year too long with saying, we'll stick with these players who are older players and veterans and all that. Now, you'd say, well, hang on. So Geelong did that with Joel Selwood, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's the luck of the whole situation, I suppose. So the Eagles need to actually rebuild, but at the same time, they're going to be in a unique position. Get in before this whole Tasmania thing happens. Get as many draft picks as you can. Get as many trades as you can. And they need to build a list, and they've got to find unique talent. Now, sometimes people say about this club did this, they got this player, they drafted him at this. Guess what? They're drafting kids. Kids don't mature until they're 21, 22. Now, the gridiron in America, the draft age is 21. The AFL draft age is a bloody joke. It always has been. I've always criticised them. Don't draft 17 and 18-year-old kids. Draft 21-year-olds who already can play. Chicken goes bang.
There we go. Goes bang right there indeed. With the Eagles, with Harley Reid, obviously he's been talking about the clear-cut number one draft pick for this year. What would you do with the Eagles if he's got any hesitation in terms of when they speak to him in management meetings or whatever? If there's any indication of him wanting to go home, would you feel that the Eagles should then split that pick one like they done with the Giants did last year? The Roos did last year.
It's an interesting point. I suppose I'm not so much up to speed as I used to be with the young talent in Australia, but look, they're in a great position. So they've got to make a decision. Do they take, say, two experienced players and get them to the club, or do they take a young kid who could be the next Wayne Carey or the next Gary Ablett Sr. or whatever? Look, your question's a good one, but to answer it's probably pretty difficult.
That's fair. Now we'll move on to a few other things, some more general footy topics now. How the game is played today. What are your thoughts of how the game's played today? And what it's going to look turn out to?
I don't want to summarise it in one word, but it's total shit. And that's two words. Like, talking to some ex-players on the weekend, and yes, they're older and everything else. They go, what do you think, Ricky? I go, you know what? I can't watch it. It goes round and round. Everyone looks at the scores because you're barrack for a team. We're only human. And if you're barrack for Collingwood, of course you're going to watch every game. But to watch games where it goes round and round in circles, goes backwards, the concussion stuff, I'll tell you why that's happening. Because the ball's on the ground. In fact, a coach, this is not me, a coach told me this at AFL Club last week. He said, Rick, you know why there's so much concussion? Because the ball's on the ground and 20 players are putting on pressure, and their head, bumping them, and their hips are hitting them. And it's going to be a huge issue going forward. So, but look, I remember someone at the AFL, I won't name him, said probably 5 or 6 years ago, Rick, you've got some good ideas on footy. What do you think we need to do to improve the game? I said, I'm telling you right now, no kicking backwards, no going backwards. You got to go forward. Because if you go forward, like rugby, you got to kick to a one-on-one contest. And that brings the Tony Lockett's back into the game, the Wayne Careys, the Jason Dunstals. And my biggest sadness for the game now is there's not a lot of characters. There's not a lot of marketable players compared to the 90s and 2000, probably up to 2010, I'd say.
So this is kind of going towards the umpiring in the moment. How do you feel the umpiring? Is it 4 umpires not work for you? Like some people don't like it. Has it made not much of a difference? Made it worse? What do you think it's done, adding a 4th and the umpiring in general?
I seriously think that it's like police, I suppose. They don't create the law. They just have to uphold it. And the umpires don't create the rules. They have to interpret them. And they've got to make a decision in 1,000th of a second. Now, a lot of the criticism at the moment is around head-high contact because of concussion, duty of care. But please, God, it's 1,000th of a second decision. Jordan De Goey 2 weeks ago or whenever it was, I'm thinking, if I ran at that player and I'm going to bump him over, you can't change once. It's probably 3 seconds out from when you make that decision. Yeah. And, I understand it from a legal point of view, but the biggest thing that the umpires are only there to adjudicate the rules. and they get criticised a lot. I think the AFL needs to decide next season, no going backwards. Simple as that.
What are your thoughts on the tribunal in terms of the MRO? Like in particular, the dangerous, like the Dan Butler one. What I described was a perfect tackle. You know, came from behind. I know what you think. And then Blakey hit his head. John Longmire said he wasn't concussed. It was just from a toe injury where he got subbed off. What are your thoughts on that particular example and the two others from this week, James Sicily and Ryan Mansell?
Look, from a spectator point of view, I understand the frustration. From a legal point of view, and I'm dealing on a lot of concussion at the moment, it's about duty of care. So the AFL, if you hit someone in the head, you're going to get, penalised. You're going to get whatever. If it's accidental, they don't care because it's duty of care legally. So this is where the game's at a very borderline situation is what's the right way to go? Do we tell players don't tackle anyone, don't bump anyone? What do we do? Because we all grew up on that sort of physical side of the game. And I think it's at a really interesting situation because, as I said, concussion and legalities and duty of care going forward are going to be massive.
Just some final few questions before I let you go. I really appreciate you coming on, Ricky. I know you're a busy person. The most disappointing team this year and the most improved side this year for you?
I think the most disappointing side's Collingwood. I really think the fact they're going to finish 9th will probably be pretty obvious in the next 5 weeks. No, I'm joking. Look, I think Port Adelaide, to be honest, look, I love the way Collingwood plays. They're the best team to watch, and I watch them every week because I love fast, forward going and foot skills. And guess what?
Yeah.
There's probably 16 clubs in the competition who can't kick a goal from 20 metres out. It's a joke. And that's my biggest criticism of the game is do they teach footballers to kick now or to run fast or be an endurance athlete? So I honestly think that my observations for the last 10 years and probably every club that's won a premiership, they storm home from about now. And Melbourne less than last year. They won the first 10. And then Oliver and Petrarca and Gawn were absolutely knackered and they couldn't storm home. The best thing that's happened to Melbourne is they probably played their best game in 5 or 6 weeks on Monday. And Oliver's out for, a few weeks or whatever. And I love Oliver. He's just a gun player. Doesn't get a lot of the accolades that he should sort of thing. But I think that Port Adelaide, I've noticed that the clubs that come home have got big bodies. And Port Adelaide, Geelong did it last year. I like where they're positioned. I just don't know why I don't have any confidence in Brisbane, probably because if they don't finish top 2, they don't get a home final. I think they'll struggle. But, could someone come from nowhere?
Who would you say is the most improved so far? That could either be in there. Would you say the Suns are being a side? They've been beating a few solid teams like the Bulldogs, and they've beaten some other close teams. To be honest, I thought they were personally robbed against Melbourne. There was, even on the commentary, I think one of your former clients, Chief Jason Dunster, wasn't happy with some of the umpiring in that last one in particular. The Suns could be someone as well. Yeah,
look, I think I'm a fan of the Gold Coast Suns. I really am. And, I think if there's going to be an outsider, the only one that would surprise you, and you might laugh at what I'm about to say, is Western Bulldogs. I watched them against Geelong and I went, oh, my God, you should have won by 4 goals. I watched them last week and I went, same thing. You probably mightn't have won, but you should have been close or just over the line. They just don't seem to finish games. But guess what? They finished the games in 2016 or whatever it was, the last 6 games of the year. So don't write the Western Bulldogs off just yet. I think Port Adelaide a massive chance. I think Collingwood, I agree. They're up there and everything else. Don't be surprised if Geelong come home. I'm not trying to pick the whole field, but let me throw it back to you. Can the Saints win it?
It's a good one because a lot of people want me to say that, and I do want to say it. Look, if anyone is going to do, Ross was the great move, as I said. So that was the start of it. Unfortunately, he didn't come until after the trade period, which was annoying. So he couldn't really do any of his real maneuvers. More, just the list manager who's no longer there, James Gallagher. But I think they can if they can stay injury free. If you get they've really got most of the main team in now. There's just a few guys that are on the cusp. Dan McKenzie hasn't played all year. If they can get those guys in, and there's no injuries like Steely's battling a knee injury at the moment, so if they can get all those guys back and they're playing at their best, wouldn't rule it out. I hope the Pies drop, but personally, I don't think we could win it. I think it's more the Pies or even the Power.
Yeah. Look, I I guess at the end of the day, you can't judge one or three things: injuries, who they're playing in the last 10 games, and confidence built around how you storm home. So, look, I think it's fairly open at the moment. I agree Collingwood's probably the best team in the comp, but I don't think the last 2 weeks have been good. I mean, against West Coast Eagles, they struggled in the three-quarter time.
In the third quarter.
Against Melbourne, who haven't played well in the last 5 weeks, they got beaten pretty – really, Melbourne should have won by 6 goals. So I think they've got, don't get me wrong, they've got players out and all that sort of thing. So I think anyone who says, oh, this club's going to win, this club's going to win, you're only guessing at the end of the day.
No, that's right, exactly.
Or guesses or predictions based on experience, but that still doesn't mean I'm right.
That's right. I agree with you there. It's too early to tell in a way. But if you just go off now, you can obviously go with the teams that are at the top. But you mentioned Collingwood too. Because they've been winning, people haven't really noticed it, but I know DeGoey's only just gone out, but they had DeGoey, Elliott, Howe, and there's been a few other guys that have been out. Cox only just come back recently. So there's been a fair few guys out, but because they're performing so well, it's kind of just flying under the radar a bit. Yeah,
well, the thing I find interesting is Darcy Moore. I coached him in junior footy.
Yeah.
People wouldn't know that. And, I did what the obvious was. I put Darcy in the ruck like his dad, put him down at full forward, played him at centre forward. And look, he blitzed under 13s, under 14s. And then one day, I thought we were winning by 10 goals every week, because we had Mark Pitney, who'd never played football in our team. We had Billy Gowers in our team. So we had a fair team with few comments. And I thought one day I'll make it fair on the team we're playing. I'll put him at centre back. And, oh, my God, he caught the ball in a world record 70 times, I reckon, when it came down there. And I went, you know what? He's going to become the next sort of intercept player, and he has become that. And that's what wins you the premiership these days.
The final question, who is the best player in the competition right now?
Well, if I said to you, who is the best player in the competition, you go first. And I don't reckon it'll be the same player.
Is it a Bulldog?
No.
Okay. Well, no, it might be the same. Or in terms of form this year, it probably people won't think I'm going to say Jack Sinclair. He's been fantastic, but he's been so good. But this year,
another Q Comets junior footballer. Jack Sinclair. I'd probably say Andrew Gaff was at Q Comets. I would have thought the players I saw, he was in Billings. I would have had him second. I would have had Jack Sinclair third. I didn't have Mark Pitney in my top 100. That he's playing great footy. But you know what? Jack Sinclair this year, in my mind, is the equal of Nick Davis.
Well, it's funny you say that. Now, people always say, when they do their own opinions, like a Brownlow vote. So I call it a scoops medal, I call mine. Call it whatever you want. But I've actually, at the moment, people might say it's ridiculous, but I got Jack Sinclair on top at the moment, but only a point between him and like people like Nick Dacos. And then, as you said, since you said it, I thought I might as well bring that up. So got them basically 1 and 2. And Rory Laird, I think the Crows, he's very underrated, Rory Laird, in terms of the bigger names that get talked about all the time, and he's kind of casted below them. I feel he's better than what he gets credit for. But if you're going to pick one, well, Jack Sinclair's leading my votes, but probably Zach Butters, probably.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, if Sace and Kilda make a prelim or get to a grand final, you'd suddenly change your opinion on Jack Sinclair pretty quickly. And the other one is, I mean, he's, Carlton are really struggling, but Mark Pitney, when you look at the ruck statistics, he's way ahead of every other ruckman in the competition. So
I'm surprised by that when I noticed that.
Well, if your ruckman's dominant, why aren't you winning games? So anyway, that's another longer story. So back to who you think the best player in the game is at the moment. Come on, lay it on the line.
I'm going to change it to what I really think. Jack Sinclair.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with Toby up in the GWS. I think
he's up there in my votes too. Top 5 he's in.
Every time the game is on the line, he produces. I think he's very I think it's for the last probably 4 years. I think he's really underrated. I think when he had the opportunity to come to Melbourne a couple of years ago, if he'd gone to a Collingwood, if he'd gone to a St Kilda, Carlton, if he'd gone to Carlton, I'm telling you now, Carlton would be top 2. Because the biggest thing they lack is a match winner. With power, you can go forward and in the midfield. They don't have a Petrarca. They don't have a Toby Greene. They don't have a Dustin Martin. Now, Dusty, probably one of the greatest players of all time, but, he's probably at the end of his career. But still performed last week. So
he did,
Yeah, so I don't disagree with Jack Sinclair, but I'd go Toby.
Yeah, I agree with Toby being up there is for sure. Like, you're talking about Carlton and that it could change them dramatically. It would, because as you said, like I gave with the Gresham example for Carlton, they could be a type of player they could have, and that type of Toby Greene, even bigger of an upgrade. And yeah, they haven't really got many good small forwards. So it'd be their best small forward. And as you said, that it'd fill those two needs with one player. But yeah, Toby Greene, Jack Sinclair, both great choices. Ricky, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for coming on, and keep up what you're doing. If your own podcast, you got your own podcast as well.
Yeah, the chicken coop's going well. We're restructuring at the moment. We'll start again in early July. Having a bit of a spell at the moment. But tell you what, your Facebook page is probably the most popular one outside the AFL official ones. So well done, mate. You're doing a great job. And, you and I haven't always agreed. But at the end of the day, you're a legend at what you do. So well done, mate, and toot toot.
Thank you very much, Ricky. All the best, and thank you very much. Thanks for the compliments. Appreciate it. Cheers. See ya.